My name is Rion Naus. I'm a Stewardship Ambassador. I'm a certified public health educator. I'm a dad, and I own and operate We Grow With LLC.
Well, thank you for joining the Nature Conservancy of Ohio's May Lunch and Learn. We do these monthly, usually at 12 p.m. virtually on Zoom. They're always free to come to. And today we have Rion Naus, who is very, very well versed in soil biology and the literacy of the soil. So Rion, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take us through this educational journey.
Wonderful. And it is a journey. Hopefully everyone can hear me all right, and that the technology, this lunch break, is actually working for everybody. My name is Rion Naus. I live in California. I'm grateful to be right there on the coast, halfway between LA and San Francisco. It's the last sane place here on the left coast. And I'm fortunate enough to be surrounded by beautiful ecosystems. And those ecosystems share with us lots of different insights. But if we don't have a biological literacy, we're oftentimes not sure how to interpret them. And so just like with people learning that weeds can be indicator species of nutrient deficiencies or other aspects of what's going on in your soil, there's an appreciation gained when we understand what is being shared with us through our ecosystem. An example of that, and I personally am a fan of gophers because they go for this and they go for that, but an example of that is how I am trying to create air and water passage and fill that with organic material down into that below surface ecosystem. And if we can step back from the fact that they maybe just ate the azaleas or they nibbled the root off that plant you were hoping that would be, the winner at the county fair, those creatures are doing the same thing. They're creating air and water passages, and they're filling it with organic material. And so from a biological literacy component, we go, they are fulfilling the same functions that I also desire to fill. And that's where, in a case of stewardship, you actually take on some of those roles to manage and steward that environmental system so that you're not overrun with gophers as well, or overrun with weeds or other, well, many people would consider nuisance, but in truth are just fulfilling their function. And when we start to talk about the soil microbiome, a lot of these creatures are actually able to perform their function because of literally how they're formed. Their shape, their physical structure limits them or creates boundaries around what they can and cannot do. And an example of that would be bacillus, which are incredibly important and facultative anaerobes. So any ferments, any sourdough, any kimchi, sauerkraut, that biology, the word bacillus actually means rod-shaped. And so that shape, that rod-shaped, think of it like a nail, right? Now it can wiggle and it can move through, but that shape holds its form, that function. There are other kinds called spirochetes that are actually shaped like a screw. That screw allows them to auger past our defenses and get into us where the nail or the bacillus would just bump into, right? And so the physical form allows it a different function. And so things like syphilis and Lyme disease are both caused by spirochetes, so they can definitely screw you, while bacilluses are those facultative anaerobes that actually benefit us. And so we could not process milk sugar, which is lactose. So we could not be mammals if it wasn't for lactobacillus, right? So they are the microbiome that is taking care of that function for us. The world we currently live in confuses us. People no longer know how to trust their eyes. They definitely don't know how to trust their gut. And when we start to look deeper into those realities, we understand that many things that we've seen, we've learned not to trust. The same sensory input, this biological literacy of our own body is about what we smell. So the nose knows to say no for a reason. It's the last line of defense before it becomes offensive. Makes sense to me, right? But now in the world we live in, there are things that we should not be smelling, should not be breathing, but because they smell bad, the marketing industries has actually shifted the gear to make bleach smell like oranges. And so now it has this sense or scent over the top of it, masking the reality of what it is. And so there are a few things like that in nature, but overall, with natural ecosystems, it is what it is, and therefore we have an understanding of how we should watch out for things. But if you've ever had a chance to travel to the Philippines or that part of Asia, they have a fruit called durian. Durian smells like death and tastes like heaven. Right? And so this is where our minds has to overcome a sensory input because we realize that there's more to it. And so we also are having to do that. When we do that, say in soil or ecosystems, we use other observation tools. We're looking closer into an environment. And behind me, I have a stereoscope and a microscope, but in truth, those are just observation tools. A pair of binoculars is also an observation tool, right? They help me see things far away and have them come up close. If you take your same pair of binoculars and you flip them upside down, put them up to your eye like this, you can actually bring things up to it and it becomes a loop or a super magnifying glass. And so now I have a tool that I can see things from far away, bringing it up close, and I have a tool that I can actually see things up close and see them even closer. And so having observation tools allows us as the observer to be able to serve more. And that's why when you observe, OB, it should be obvious for our service. And that's why when you're observant, you're a servant, because you can see what's going on around you and how things may or may not be out of place. Those are also cues to you to maybe go and look or ask those questions to help you see things more clearly. I'm going to switch to the stereoscope here just to do some observations with people. The stereo is connected to stereo surround sound, right? It means three-dimensional. It means you can see things from a depth perspective. When we look things through the microscope, it's a two-dimensional plane. Everything is squished between the slide and the slide cover. And so we're not seeing it in an in situ or, just out in an environment, normal situation. So to be able to do that, I'm going to move here. We're going to use a stereoscope. Really easy to use. You can use little dishes. You put whatever you want into it. You slide it around. And then when we slide it around, we're able to see. So I'm going to switch over to the stereoscope. So this here, if anybody can see, and this is where I can't hear you, so we're going to work with that. This here is actually one of our monarchs that we have. They roost here on the Central Coast. They travel all over the country and up through Mexico, but they stay here and overwinter. And so one of them didn't make it quite as far to the beach, and so it landed here and didn't make it any farther. And so in this process, we're able to actually look, and then when we see the wing itself, we're able to look at that wing and see on top of that wing all of the little tiny mini wings or scales that are actually covering the wing. Now, if this was a leaf, we'd be able to look at that and be able to see potentially insect predation or fungal illnesses and diseases. But this is also where we can get even closer and see what hitchhikes and comes around on top of. So we're now looking at individual scales on the wing. How would this help us? Well, I don't know. That's the whole point of being an observer and to be observant. And so when we do have an opportunity to look at things, sometimes it changes our reality. Here next to the butterfly wing is actually, let's see. Yep, there we go. Is actually a local wasp that we have. And you can see the brilliant colors that make up that wasp. Oh, there we go. When we talk about insects, those insects are attracted to our plants. When an insect is attracted to our plants have actually sent out signals to tell it to come to the plant, right? When that's taking place, there are cues in that ecosystem, both for what the insect is bringing in and the rest of the ecosystem in a response. And so if there's fungal communities, those fungal communities can actually consume and eat the insect themselves. Insects being part of arthropoda and all made of chitin, and chitin being fungi food. But if you'll notice, that blue color and the purple colors, part of the coloration is actually different mineral structures. And so if the plant has a mineral deficiency, it will call in a cleanup crew, and believe it or not, some of that cleanup crew is actually made from the minerals it's deficient itself. And so therefore, it is bringing in those little bits of essential elements and micronutrients in its physical structure. But just like when we look at the microbiome, if we don't have something there to cycle that nutrition, it stays bound up. And so this is where those fungal communities are incredibly important to be able to work with. Now, when we look at things through the microscope, it is going to look different. Because it's squished between two pieces of glass, we have a different perspective. Here, before I switch over to that, we actually have an opportunity to look at some roots. When we have this opportunity to look at the roots, we're actually seeing aggregate structure around the root zone itself. When people talk about a rhizosheath, they're talking about this protective coating all along and around the outside of the root zone. And for your plants and the microbiome, that's actually where the party's at. That root zone, that rhizosphere around your roots itself, is tremendously dense with life. Right? That density has been pulled together and nurtured by the plant in the process of sending out exudates. You can actually see even closer here some of those root hairs coming out and into the rest of the system. When we look at it under a microscope, we're not able to see how these things are actually bound together three-dimensionally because we put it into water, we shake it up, and then we put a dilution out on the slide for everybody to look at. If right now everybody's just blocked out silent-wise, if there are any questions or interactions, I would prefer that as we go so that I can point out different things over this time that we do have today. So when we want to be able to look even closer, right? So this is a progression. We have our binoculars, we have our stereoscope, and then we have the microscope. All that's allowing us to do is look closer and closer and closer into even the same drop or sample. When we're able to do that, especially in disturbed soils and environmental and chemical impact, we're actually able not just to see like through the binoculars how far away something is, but when we look through the microscope, we're actually able to see how far away we've come from working with the rest of the system. And so if I have a sample that I can look at the macro scale and then in transition to the micro scale, and I still don't see any life, and I still don't see any life. And then I look at it all the way until 400 magnification, and we barely, but only see some bacteria. And even then it's not diverse. What that tells me is we've killed things all the way down to that fundamental level. When we have a living system, that living system grows on top of itself. it stacks. And some people understand this as trophic succession, but that's that progression, that snowballing, getting more complex, getting more diverse, getting bigger and bigger. And so as we go through an ecosystem, from things consuming sunshine to things consuming the things that consume that sunshine, we understand how these different roles interact on our ecosystems. And those predator-prey relationships are still a relationship no matter how big or small the creatures might be. So I teach multiple classes, and one is a soil CPR course, other is Stewardship First Responder, but the soil CPR course is the foundation, because if you don't recognize that it can't breathe, then we're not actually in recognition that it's a living system, right? We talk about evaporation in a non-living system versus respiration in a living system. Like the moisture's still going out, it's still being processed, but it's in how it's being processed that is important. And so through a living system, we have a dynamic, interactive world that we too get to participate in. So I call it the soil CPR and the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. I do a 2-day program in that, so this little half hour is a little condensed, but it really comes down to us accessing biological cycles, ABC, and to be able to do that, we have to understand the role of I, have biological literacy, and then understand the rule of 3. And the rule of 3 is a survival priority memory aid to help us understand how some of our choices actually lead to a thriving ecosystem versus leading to a dying or just barely surviving ecosystem. And so an example of that is if you don't do it in 3 seconds, you're dead. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Everybody must be in a safe and secure environment situation. So congratulations. Next thing we have to worry about is breathing. So if we don't do this in 3 minutes, we're dead. And so as we're going through and respiring, that one's taken care of. Well, what about 3 hours? This one confuses people, and you'll often hear people talk about eating, but I'm grateful to not wake up every 3 hours in the middle of the night to eat. But the 3 hours is actually connected to environmental or exposure. It can be super hot and super cold, and if you're not prepared, you can be outside and just 3 hours not make it back inside. So when we go through the rule of 3 as a memory aid, we understand that there's these different priorities that all living creatures, that's part of that role of I, require to have a happy and healthy ecosystem. Part of that biological literacy for ourselves is if you don't personally want to live there or be there, most of the other things don't want to either. If it's too hot, it's too sunny, it's too dry, it's too disorganized, those would all be factors that limit the habitat hospitality for the rest of the ecosystem as well. Now, a few little other factors connected to this. We have our living system, but we also have the mineral components that this living system interacts with. We have a fossilization of taking organic material and becoming more mineral. Like we have that take place in our own bodies in arthritis, where we're mineralizing organic material. What we're wanting to do is maximize what the organic material can do. And so to be able to do that, these biological factors such as enzymes and enzyme cofactors all connect to these mineral catalysts. And so when we utilize herbicides that chelate and take out those elements, we're taking out what are called essential elements. And essential means required for life. And so if we've taken out the things required for life, it makes sense to me why things are dying, both at the micro and the macro scale. And so if we were driving the truck down the road and it's a hot day, but I started pulling fuses, little teeny tiny elements, little tiny pieces of metal, right, out of the truck, My truck would still run, but the air conditioner doesn't. My truck would still run, but now the radio doesn't. And if my radio and air conditioner doesn't work, I can still get there, but the ride, the journey is miserable. And so when we talk about this connected to plants, that would be a plant that has an inability to handle environmental stressors. It can't deal with a heat component or a lack of water. And so you can actually have the biology itself there in your system, which is why observation tools are so important. But if you do not have the enzyme cofactors, that bacteria can't make glue. And if it can't make glue, then it can't glue itself together with others and make aggregates. And if we can't have a micro aggregate like a snowball, it doesn't get bigger and bigger until we have macro aggregates as well. And so when we're talking about soil structure and we're talking about the importance of this biology and nutrient cycling, we need to understand that there are some outside of the biological realms that are putting limiting factors on the system itself that we're trying to encourage and nurture. And there's often a legacy of what has already been put on to seeds and into the soil that we have to remediate. Depending on the situation, it's important to be remediative before you can be regenerative, because if it's in a process of healing, we don't want to set that healing back before it can start running once again. I'm not sure how we're doing on time. If I could get some feedback on that, I appreciate it.
Yeah, 7 minutes. I do have a quick question.
Yeah, let's do some questions.
When it comes to relating these concepts to a larger audience, I was wondering what methods you found to be best for changing behaviors or like making an impact. Like, is it the observation tools? Is it looking at the observation tools on like the structure of, like you're saying, the rhizosphere? Like, what do you think makes an impact, especially for the people who, are doing the growing?
Excellent. So part of the observation tools, and I do believe this is part of accepting of new information, is you can shift it from you no longer trust your eyes to seeing is believing once again, right? And so an example of that is if we're talking about mycorrhizal fungi and we're interacting with all of these different things over and over again, there's a difference between hearing that, even seeing it in a book, and then, here's an example, and then being able to pull it up in real time and actually see the mycorrhizal fungi inoculating and interacting inside the plant cell and the root zone itself. That then gives confirmation and affirmation to the person who just bought a product, right? You see, now that product that they purchased has a verification in the field. At which point it shifts gears between being confident and actually being competent. Because I want you to be able to, and then you feel better about it, versus feeling good about it and still not be able to. Right? And so this is part of that progression of being able to trust your eyes again. And the same factor is when you start to trust your eyes again and you start to look, and that inquisitive spirit is there to look and find out, that also allows you to then maybe go take a chance and look at some sauerkraut juice or some kimchi or some of these fermented foods, and recognizing that you consume them, and then you can actually see the biology itself that you're consuming, and potentially that helps you trust your gut again too. And so still, it's an observation that allows us to understand what should be obvious to our service, and that's why all these words are spelled that way. So great question, and I do believe that observation tools are incredibly important. It's a struggle to have someone send off to get lab testing or other data points and metrics, and they just get back a couple weeks later a piece of paper with numbers on it. These tools don't give you numbers unless you choose to count. These tools allow you to see in real time what is or isn't there. And that has a powerful role in making better decisions for both livestock and the land. Great question.
Thanks for that. And if there's any other questions, we got a few minutes left before we hit the half-hour mark. I encourage anyone to ask him real quick. Otherwise, if there's anything else that you wanted to end out on, perhaps like a summary or some type of synthesis, I encourage that as well.
Yeah, a lot of people I work with, they're part of FFA, Future Farmers of America, right? Really great. Blue Jackets, awesome. I was in 4-H, and so part of 4-H was you had to understand what the 4-H's were. And so the 4-H's is about your head, your heart, your hands, and your health. And these are all aspects of who we are and what we can do and serve our communities. My opportunity with my background is as an educator. Like I used to lead 60-day-long backpacking trips with juvenile offenders because I believe nature should be our therapeutic tool, and went back to school and got a master's in outdoor education because I believe it should be our educational model as well. And for the last 7 years, I've been working with agriculture because, who knew? Farmers need to know about nature too. And so great opportunities for everyone to continue learning and to use our own observation tools, our sensory inputs, to have a better grasp of what's going on in the world around us.
Thank you, Ryan. That's also a really cool drop at the end, the 60-day backpacking trips. That's really cool.
Oh, yeah. Nature, me and nature, we're on point.
That was really awesome. I'll have to hit you up more privately to get more information on that one. But thank you so much for presenting. Thank you for the people who came out today. We post these on our YouTube channel. We send them out to everyone who's registered. So yeah, look out for an email in the future with a link to this. And I hope that you all have a great day.
As do I. Have a wonderful day, everyone.